Welcome to Chapter 14 of our Human Communication course. This one's Leadership. Leadership. And we're really talking about, communicating to others and trying to make sure that our messages are understood in this section. All right. So, leadership is one of the most studied aspects in group communication, because many leaders are talking to more than just one person. They're talking to a team, right? Scholars in business and communication, as well as psychology and other fields, have written extensively about the qualities of great leaders, theories of leadership, how to build leadership skills. So there's tons of information out there. I'm just going to overview it as quickly and succinctly as possible so that you can get a good basis. There are different styles of leadership. We're going to talk about that as well. A leader is a group role that's associated with a high status position and may be formally or informally recognized by group members, right? Leadership is a complex set of beliefs, communication patterns, and behaviors that influence the functioning of a group and move a group towards the completion of a task. A person in the role of leader may provide no or poor leadership as well. Sometimes people can not be recognized in leader as a title, right? But you still provide excellent leadership. So we're going to talk about that in this section, chapter 14. How and why people become leaders. Throughout human history, some people have grown into, taken, or been given positions as leaders. Many early leaders were believed to be divine, of God, so to speak. In some indigenous cultures, shamans are considered leaders because they are believed to be the bridge between the spiritual and physical realm. You know, we think about Europe and other continents for that matter. In Africa, you have the pharaohs, and much more. There are so many subcultures within Africa where kings and queens were, the leaders of their people. Today, many leaders are elected or appointed to positions of power, but most of them have already accumulated some experience in leadership roles. Some leaders are well respected, some are feared, some are hated. Many elicit some combination of all of those reactions, right? This brief overview illustrates the centrality of leadership throughout human history. It wasn't until the last 100 years or so that we really started to study leadership, though. Before we move into specific approaches of studying leadership, let's distinguish between designated and emergent leaders. In general, some people gravitate more towards leadership roles than others. Other leaders are designated, right? But some, meaning they're appointed by people, by the group maybe even. Others emerge. They're called emergent. These people, like Gandhi I put here, they step out and they just become a leader de facto by their people through their skills, their leadership skills. Designated leaders can be especially successful when they're sought out by others to fulfill and then accept those leadership roles. On the other hand, some people seek out leadership positions not because they possess leadership skills, but because they've been successful leaders in the past, or they may have the drive to hold and wield power. Many groups are initially leaderless and must designate a leader or wait for one to emerge organically. Emergent leaders gain status and respect through engagement of their people, their group, and it's a task that they perform, basically. Others turn to them when the resource of leadership is needed, right? When they need someone to help direct them. Emergent leaders play an important role when a designated leader leaves unexpectedly or there's a vacuum or there's a need of the people that's not being addressed by the designated leader. That's how emergent leaders kind of come into power. We're going to turn our attention to 3 common perspectives on why people are more likely to be designated leaders than others, and how leaders emerge in the absence of a leadership role, a good solid leadership role. Leaders emerge because of their traits. That's the first. So when we think about this, some traits that are in leaders are physical appearance, communication ability, intelligence, personality. Generally, when I said physical appearance, good leaders tend to be taller. That's one of those unfortunate things I was not blessed with. At 5'9", I'm just not tall. And also, generally, we pick more attractive leaders than less attractive leaders. We also generally like people who don't have a lot of body fat, and this is to be our leaders. And it's kind of silly, but it's just something we've done throughout the course of history. Generally speaking, you can almost always bet it's like an 80% chance that the taller of the presidential candidates will win. If you look, you can, follow through, you'll see that I think it's 82% actually. So it's just something silly that we do as human beings, and I don't know why. So as far as communication abilities, leaders are fluent speakers. They have confident tone. They communicate more often than other group members, so they need that skill set, right? They're also generally moderately to more intelligent than the other group members. And that's attractive to the group because leaders need to have good problem-solving skills. Group members are not as likely to designate and recognize an emergent leader as that they perceive to be exceedingly more intelligent than them, which is kind of weird. It's a contrast. That we wouldn't normally think, but that is a very real bias by other group members. They'll seek to keep emerging leaders from succeeding if they feel that they're vastly more intelligent than them. And then, of course, lastly, leaders are more extroverted, typically, assertive, and persistent than the general group members. Those personality traits help get those people within the group noticed, and then help motivate them or move them through to become leaders. The trait of studying how leaders become leaders and if they're successful or not, as I said, has been kind of an ongoing debate for about 100 years now. And it provides some useful information regarding on how people view ideal leaders. It also teaches us maybe how we can become better leaders, right? But we really have had difficulty narrowing down sometimes the whys of how come a person can become so successful. I flashed a slide a little bit ago. It had John F. Kennedy, who was deemed a very successful leader. He had his flaws, especially in the personality side of things. Wasn't much of a family man. I mean, he loved his kids. He loved his wife. Problem was he loved a lot. But he was a good, solid leader in a time where we were in crisis. And then I flashed the other one on that slide is Ulysses S. Grant, an alcoholic who had success as a soldier, as a leader of soldiers, and eventually took the nomination for his party. And in doing so, surrounded himself with a bad cabinet who were really exploitive and ultimately went down in history as not one of the best presidents that we've had. So you see that there's a lot of dynamics there that can affect whether or not leaders are great leaders. I've also seen leaders that should have been great leaders possess many of those skill sets I've mentioned before, but not be successful. So these traits of leadership, it's not just this guarantees you success. All right. When we study the emergent leadership approach and how people just fill a power vacuum of leadership, it's been probably, honestly, we haven't studied it. I don't even think we've gotten 100 years on that. I think we're basically looking at the last 50, where we recognize the emergent leaders stepping in and helping in situations. So when we talk about emergent leaders, again, they merge in a situation where there's a power vacuum or a leaderless group. The situational context that surrounds a group influences what type of leader ends up being best. Situations may be highly structured or highly unstructured or anywhere in between, right? Research shows that leaders with high task orientation are likely to emerge in both highly structured contexts as well as highly unstructured contexts. Relational-oriented leaders are more likely to emerge in semi-structured contexts that are less formal and in groups composed of people who have specific knowledge and therefore are trusted to do much of their own work independently. For example, a group of business owners who form a working network are more likely to prefer a leader with a relational orientation style, since those group members are already kind of leaders in their own right, in their own situation, right, in their own area. And then they might resent a person who takes a rigid, task-oriented style over a more collegial style. Right? Leaders emerge because of the situation. Time and time again, we're going to see that pop up throughout history. There are two stages to this scenario, but the first stage covers only a smaller period, and sometimes in a group it could be just part of one meeting, right? During this first stage, about half the group members are eliminated from the possibility of becoming the group leader unconsciously or consciously through our group, through our talk. Remember that this is an informal and implicit process, not like people are being picked for a kickball team or, to play softball or something. This is not one of those situations. But there are some communicative behaviors that influence who will make the cut to go to the next stage of informal leadership consideration. People will likely be eliminated as a leader or leader candidate if they do not actively contribute to the initial group interactions, or if they do contribute but the communication is poor, or if what they contribute appears to be too rigid or inflexible with the group's beliefs, or if they just seem ignorant or uninformed about what the group is trying to accomplish. Now, that second stage of group leader emergence is a much longer process, and it has a more pronounced struggle for the leadership role. In one scenario, let's take a leader candidate picks up an ally in the group who acts as a supporter or backer for them, reinforcing the ideas and contributions of the candidate. If there are no other leader candidates who pick up a supporter, the candidate with the supporter will most likely become the leader. It's about a 70% chance that they will. In a second scenario, let's take a different scenario where two leader candidates who both pick supporters, meaning have people rallying people, hey, this person should be our leader, and they're both qualified. This can lead to a drawn out and intense situation, sort of a power struggle, that can be uncomfortable for most of the other group members. Although the two leader candidates don't overtly fight over who's going to be the leader, they both take strong stances, and this situation can drag on for a while before one of them is picked. Sometimes leaders emerge because of the situation. Meaning, if there's low task and low in social cohesion within the group, one candidate supporter team will sometimes retreat, leaving a clear leader to step up. But the candidate who retreated will still enjoy a relatively high success within the group, and could, of course, be thought of as possibly our next leader if this leader goes away. Sometimes the second place candidates, however, can be a nuisance for the new emergent leader, questioning their decisions or actions. The new leader's got to give, to be successful in this, the new leader's got to give that secondary candidate who lost the leadership kind of role, give them extra responsibilities within the group to make use of that person's respected influence within the group, and that'll make the group more successful. Remember this from chapter 13, the structure of small group. Internal and external influences affect group structure, and therefore they can affect how a group picks a leader. A person who's well informed about the group task and highly motivated in the group may emerge as the group leader. And he may set, or she may set a motion internal decision-making process, such as recruiting members, new members, assigning group roles, things like that, which would affect the structure of the group. Different members will gravitate towards different roles because, again, remember, we all have our interests and strengths. So these things affect how we pick a leader and how the group grows and or emerges. Leaders generally can emerge based on their communication skill and competence. I've run into this one a few times. If you're better at communicating, long story short, I'm going to cut this slide down. If you're better at communicating, people tend to pick you because they know that you can voice out any concerns or questions. They believe that you will be able to help them find resources through your communication skills. Pure and simple. They also trust that you'll handle crisis within the group better. So that could be rightly or wrongly, but that's their feeling and belief system. Generally, we pick leaders sometimes on, or many times we pick leaders on their competency and skills in other areas as well. Okay? But remember, with communication skills, we can improve them, and if we improve them, we will consistently find ourselves moving towards leadership or major contributor roles within groups. Also, we know that people with strong communication skills as leaders can sway the judgment of a group or decisions of a group by their speaking and persuasive skills, right? When we think about, and many times people with great leadership skills do have great communication skills because it's a necessary in delegation. That allows the leader to look at that big picture and keep the group moving. Key behaviors that contribute to task-related functions within a group, remember, are contributing ideas, seeking ideas, evaluating ideas, seeking idea evaluation, visualizing abstract ideas, and generalizing from specific ideas. And communicators can help do those things well, generally speaking. Leadership behaviors that contribute to groups' procedural related functions can help the group as it proceeds, generally from that idea getting stage to the final implementation of their ideas. And remember, not every leader is a great communicator, though. So just because I'm saying this doesn't mean that it's always going to work out. When we think about idea generation sessions, the procedure to be most effective would be, again, have goal setting, agenda make, have a clear agenda, clarify for all those that might be confused, summarize good ideas, these plans, verbalize a consensus, meaning make sure that the group comes together and comes up with a consensus, and then, generalize specific outcomes. Leadership is a complex animal. And I focus a lot on the communication skill and competency side, please read through this PowerPoint further to kind of grab some more knowledge, but I'm going to make sure I highlight the important parts. A great leader can quell people who are trying to monopolize discussions, meaning talking about things that aren't productive to the group. Remember, there's some small part of that speak that is needed, but if we do too much socializing, we don't get to that final result of problem solved, that task resolved, and therefore it becomes a problem. So great leaders with great communication skills can help keep the right amount of communication flowing within the group. Also, leaders can encourage group members to meta-communicate or talk about groups communication. This can help identify and begin to address any interpersonal or communication issues before they escalate and create a crisis, right? Remember, conflict is, when handled competently, can enhance all the group members' performance. Leaders can even instigate productive conflict resolution by playing devil's advocate. I do that a lot as a leader. I will question ideas as we're in the idea validation stage. And I explain this before I ever jump in. I say, what I'm going to do, it's not I'm anti your idea. I'm going to look at the flip side of every idea that's presented here to try to make sure we're coming up with the best ideas, and none of these ideas will create a problem potentially. And that's something I would suggest that someone do, especially the leader. So, a great communication-based leader can regulate participation, help in climate making, meaning making the group's overall health better, instigate group self-analysis, resolve conflict, and instigate a productive conflict to create better idea sets. Given the large amount of research done regarding leadership styles, there are several different ways to define or categorize leadership styles. In general, effective leaders do not fit solely in just one style. We can't bookend them. We can't force them into a mold. Instead, they're able to adapt their leadership style to fit the relational and situational context, generally speaking, especially great leaders. One common way to study leadership style is to make distinction between autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire leaders. And we're going to explain those type of leaders. There are two out of those three, autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire. I showed two extremes of those leaders on this slide. Autocratic leaders set policies and make decisions on their own, taking advantage of the power to present their title and status to set the agenda for their government, their group. Democratic leaders facilitate group discussion and take input from all members before making a decision, and laissez-faire leaders take a hands-off approach, preferring to give the group members freedom to reach and implement their own decisions. While this is frequently cited, like most frequently cited leadership models set, I'm going to break down these even further. And I do throw in a little quiz. If you wish to take it, you do not have to, but it's done by Harvard to determine what someone's leadership style is. So, more than just the three overview, the big umbrella, autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire, we also have different other type of leaders within that. A directive leadership style is effective in groups that do not have a history and may require direction excuse me, to get started on their task. It's the most appropriate method during a crisis situation in which decisions must be made under tight time constraints or have extraordinary pressures. When groups have established history and are comprised of people with unique skills and expertise, a directive approach may be seen as micromanaging. So that wouldn't be the best type of manager in that sense. Directive leaders help provide psychological structure for their group members by clearly communicating expectations, keeping a schedule and agenda, providing specific guidance as group members work towards the completion of their task, and taking on a lead on setting and communicating group rules and procedures. Although this is most similar to the autocratic style, it is more nuanced and much more flexible. Originators of this model can note that a leader can be directive without being seen as authoritarian. Now, it takes some more skill, but to do this, directive leaders must be good motivators who encourage productivity through positive reinforcement and reward rather than the threat of punishment. Participative leaders, they work together with the group members in the decision-making process by soliciting and considering all the group members' opinions and suggestions. This makes the group members feel included, and their personal goals are more likely to align with the group and organizational goals, and that helps with productivity. This style of leadership can also aid in group members' socialization, as the members feel like they can help establish group norms, the rules, and regulations. They can feel that the group communication, even social, will be cohesive and uniform. When group members participate more, they buy into the group norms and goals more, which continues to increase productivity, but it also increases the conformity pressures within group members. As we learned earlier in 13, this is good to a point, but it can be a negative structure when pressures lead to unethical group member behavior or feeling forced or coerced to make a decision for the betterment of the group. Participative leaders is a democratic style, and it's a style of leadership practiced in many organizations that have established work groups and meet consistently over long periods of time. This is a very corporate environment, especially we really started doing this in the 80s and moving forward, because we modeled this after the way Japanese corporations were doing their business. The Japanese corporations were really blurring that line between the leader and the group members or other workers, and that we saw that enhanced productivity and problem-solving skills. So, really cool way, but it's difficult leadership role to manage. Supportive leaders show their concern for the followers' needs and emotions. They check on group welfare through positive and friendly group climate. This helps reduce the overall group stress and keeps everybody working in a higher level. They're also great at helping group members come up with great ideas to solve the problems. However, there is a conflict there. Not all the ideas are great, and their supportive leaders aren't always the best at weeding out the best ideas. Does that make sense? They're generally relational than task focused, and that doesn't help them get to that end goal of that task being solved, they're better. A supportive leader is better for a social group. Achievement-oriented leaders strive for excellent and challenging goals. They'll help motivate a group, but sometimes that motivation and that drive can be too intense and cause people to kind of just not feel they can keep up the pace. When I think about achievement-oriented leaders, we got Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Clinton was an achievement-oriented leader, and even Warren Buffett kind of reminds me of that. He is that role. Just driven, hardcore driven, and sometimes people couldn't keep up the pace. Achievement-oriented leaders are less common than any of the other styles. It takes a high level of skill and commitment on the part of the leader, and the group has to buy in. Now, these can be found in almost all top levels of Fortune 500 companies, usually in the CFO role. So the financial officer, not so much the CEO, although sometimes the CEO role will be that person, and the financial officer will be more task-based. So it's a unique leadership style, but it burns through your team, your group team's energy quickly, as many can't struggle to keep up pace. Also, the group must have tons of respect for that leader for that to be successful. When we think about leaders and power, because that's a dynamic or a dyad that they possess, leaders help move group members towards the completion of the goal, right? They use various motivational strategies or styles. The types of power leaders draw on really motivate the group, and it's been studied pretty in depth since the 50s. There are 5 types: legitimate, expert, referent, informational, and reward cohesive. Effective leaders generally do not possess all 5 of these, okay? They're competent in 1 or 2 of these, maybe. So when we think about expert power, it comes from knowledge, skill, or expertise. They know how to do the job, therefore they're leaders by de facto, because they could get the job done, and they can help motivate you to get the job done. Referent power comes from the attractiveness, likability, and charisma of the group member. They're chosen for their star power. Referent power doesn't mean they have a talent, skill, or other characteristic needed for the group. They could just be likable, but they have access to resources, they're well respected, and so they end up with referent power, meaning it came to them by default. Information power is someone's ability to access information channels and get knowledge and resources through there. So that's how informational power kind of plays. They also generally are better at maintaining relationships. And then we've got reward and coercive power. So the final 2 types of power, reward or coercive, it's pretty self-explanatory. Let's jump into them. Reward power can be used by any group member to give to another group member for positive feedback, right? Pat on the back, good idea, those things. You know, sometimes leadership is struggling or frustrated because they can't give good prizes for a contest or whatever like that. But the point is, that's reward power. That's how some leaders choose to help or keep the group moving. Other leaders use coercive power, and that's punishment or negative incentive. Do this or else. We're seeing a lot of that from high levels of government right now, unfortunately. It's a strategy, but it doesn't embolden itself with the people. Doesn't help itself, or doesn't help that leader retain power like they think it does. Okay? It ends up backfiring on them many, many times. It's forced compliance. No one likes to be forced compliant. How many of you have ever been forced compliant? Coercive power was used on you at your workplace, right? Many of us can raise our hands. I can do that. In fact, it still happens. Still happens. I'm not going to tell you what industry it happens to me in, but it's the one I most care about, believe it or not. So, and it's frustrating because the powers that be, while they say that they want a goal to be reached, when others present great ideas that will work in other institutions are using them, they shut you down because it's not their idea, it's not their plan, and they make it known that you need to sit down and be quiet. So it's frustrating. Coercive power is not a great leadership methodology to force people to do anything in life. When we think about group member roles, most of us play multiple group member roles throughout groups in our life, and we can play multiple group member roles within one group. The role categories include task-related roles, maintenance roles, individual roles that are self-centered or unproductive for the group. We're going to roll through those, and I'm sorry, it looks like we didn't. So when we go to task-related roles, okay, when we think about the first category, task-related roles help people get things done within the group. So they could be an organizer, a task leader, an expediter, somebody who helps get something done, information provider, somebody who runs and researches and looks stuff up, information seeker, same thing, a gatekeeper who keeps people from taking up time of the group, and a recorder, someone within the group that documents what's going on to keep us all online, right? So, again, I'd suggest that you read all these, but I'm not going to push all this through to you. Probably won't ask too many questions on this in our final, okay? When we think about maintenance roles, within maintenance roles, there's social emotional leader, meaning someone who keeps the group together in a social and emotional role. There are supporters to that leader. There are tension releasers, somebody who cracks the jokes. I'm really good at that one. Keep it low key, keep it lighter in moments, because sometimes we just got to release that pressure. There's the harmonizer, who helps make sure everybody gets along. And the interpreter, meaning whenever there's confusion, they seek to resolve that space. Again, not going to force you to remember all these things, but I do want you to read through it because you can see yourself in some of these. Right? Now let's talk a little bit about negative roles and behavior. Earlier I said there's self-seeking, self-centered roles, and those are negative. People that are actually time sucks from the group, right? They don't contribute anything, and in fact may slow productivity.